West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Tonight, the Georgia prosecutor leading a criminal probe into former President Trump, beefing up her team of investigators looking at Trump's efforts to overturn the state's election results. CNN confirming Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis has hired close to half a dozen more lawyers for her investigation, which stems from Trump's phone call demanding the Secretary of State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, find him enough votes to win the state of Georgia.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
Sarah Murray is out front. Sarah, the prosecutor's office building out the team for obviously what is an incredibly consequential investigation. Tell me what more you know.
It is. You know, Fani Willis took office in January, and essentially what she did is she rebuilt an anti-corruption unit. She got rid of a lot of folks who were already there as part of a public integrity unit. And, you know, she brought on a lot of these people, not just to work on the Trump case. They're going to be working on a number of anti-corruption cases. But obviously you will see how their expertise could be useful in an investigation into the former president. You know, she's bringing on people like Mike Carlson, who is an expert in the rules of evidence. He actually wrote a book on the rules of evidence in Georgia with his father. There's a guy named John Floyd. He's coming on in a contract position. He's an expert in racketeering. These are, you know, really complex cases to investigate. They're complex charges to bring. He also literally wrote the book on racketeering in Georgia. And then beyond that, you know, you're looking at someone like Raymond Baez. This is one of the few folks who was already in the public integrity office in the Fulton County District Attorney's office that Fani Willis decided to keep on. This is someone who's relatively young, but he has experience as a former Atlanta cop. He has experience in complex investigations. So this is kind of just a look at some of the folks in this team that she's building to deal with anti-corruption cases in the Atlanta area in general, but also whose expertise could be very useful in this investigation into the former president.
So, Sarah, you know, with your expertise covering this, what does this mean for the types of charges Trump could face in Georgia?
Well, we have an indication of the kinds of charges she's looking at because, remember, she sent those letters to officials in the state of Georgia who we don't believe are targets, but she essentially said, we need you to save this information, we need you to save documents because we are investigating the solicitation of election fraud, we're investigating conspiracy, we're investigating racketeering. Now, these are not going to be home runs. They're not going to be super easy for her to prove, especially when you talk about a racketeering case, but it gives you a sense that she's not just looking at the former president's behavior, she's also looking at the behavior of folks around the former president who may have sort of helped him carry out his efforts to try to overturn the election results in Georgia.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah. And I want to bring in now Matthew Dowd, chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign, and Ellie Honig, CNN legal analyst and a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So, Ellie, what sticks out to you? You hear about this team, their specialties that the Fulton County prosecutor is building, and the significance of adding 6 attorneys.
Yeah, Aaron, so it's clear to me this investigation is gaining steam. First of all, importantly, the district attorney, who's fairly new to her position, she's only been there a few months, essentially has cleaned house on this corruption unit, which in her estimation was ineffectual. And now she's brought in, I think, a higher powered group of attorneys. What jumps out to me really is the hiring of this racketeering expert. Now, racketeering laws are a very powerful tool for prosecutors. I used to charge mafia, organized crime families with racketeering. But it can be applicable elsewhere. What you have to show is two things. One, that there was an organized group, that it was more than just one person doing this. And two, what we call a pattern of racketeering, meaning multiple crimes or a sort of coordinated effort over a period of time to commit crimes. So it tells me they're looking at really more serious charges here.
Well, all right. So, Matthew, more serious charges becoming more likely. And yet Trump continuing to, demonstrate for the world to see that he's willing to keep putting the big lie out there. This weekend, he took the microphone at a wedding at Mar-a-Lago to talk about it. TMZ got the video, so let me show it.
They said, get 66 million votes, sir, and the election's over. Well, I got 75 million, and they said, but you saw what happened. 10:30 in the evening, all of a sudden they said, that's a strange thing. Why are they closing up certain places, right? A lot of things happening right now. I just wanted to say it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have you at Mar-a-Lago. You are a great and beautiful couple.
Matthew, so he starts his toast with, his election. That's what happens.
Yeah, I think Vince Vaughn is a better version of Wedding Crashers than Donald Trump at this point in time. I mean, the problem is yes, Donald Trump is possibly going to be held accountable for what he's done in this, but the damage he's done to our democracy is much more lasting and it's much more long held. And the damage he's done to citizens of this country, at least a third, who have believed with this lie that he's told about the fraud in the election, and response to the lie, as you know, Aaron, by state legislative offices around the country to try to do something about the fraud, which doesn't exist. So Donald Trump, he's his own crazy celebrity, and whatever he wants to do at a wedding is fine. But as he keeps lying, he's doing incredible damage to our democracy. So
Ellie, this comes as the Fulton County DA has told the Daily Beast that subpoenas are likely coming in the very near future. Boil all this down for us. If this really is going ahead at full steam and they have the goods to prove, crimes, this is a criminal probe, then what does that mean for, the person at the other end of this, for Trump?
Yeah, Aaron, so the fact that they're getting ready to issue subpoenas tells me they're sort of in the heart of their investigation. Usually as a prosecutor, you wouldn't issue subpoenas first thing. You want to get a base of knowledge under you. Then you start issuing subpoenas. This is where things are going to get really interesting, because if a person gets a subpoena, they really have a few choices. One, testify under oath in front of the grand jury under penalty of perjury. Two, take the fifth, but that sort of is a red flag to prosecutors that person may have some criminal liability. Or three, if you ignore it, the U.S. Marshals will show up at your house and take you in to testify in handcuffs. So things are going to get real now. If the evidence is there, I actually have faith that this district attorney, she's shown that she's bold and independent, and if the proof is there to match the crime of solicitation of election fraud, then we could well see a criminal charge. And a criminal charge, if proven, would result, correct, in prison time. Yeah, under the Georgia law, this particular crime is punishable by 1 to 3 years in prison. It would be a felony. It's very rare to see somebody convicted of a felony and not go to prison for at least some time. I mean, it's just a pretty incredible thing to even just think about as we all take a moment to just consider that. Matthew, obviously you're pointing out the third of the public who may believe Trump's big lie. But it was a lie that actually officials in Georgia stood up to, right? Republican officials, Governor Kemp, the Secretary of State Raffensperger. Here's more from that call between the Secretary of State and Trump that actually launched this whole criminal probe in Georgia.
So dead people voted. And I think the number is in the close to 5,000 people.
And the actual number were two people that were dead that voted. And so that's wrong. That was two. Well,
and yet, Matthew, Georgia now has a bill that's passed, right, that would allow unlimited challenges to voters, right? So if you want to say 6,000 dead people voted and you're wrong, you can go check every single person. Right? They're going to limit, the drop boxes, even though obviously the governor himself had used them. What do you make of the mixed messaging?
Well, it's fascinating to me about this is, yes, it was great that they stood up at the time to Donald Trump and basically acknowledged that there wasn't fraud and the election was held accurately and safely in this time. But it seems to me now every single one of those people are supporting these impediments put them in. Keep in mind one thing, Aaron. The Jim Crow laws that were passed in Georgia and other states in the 1870s and 1880s were legal. And so it seems to me what they're doing in Georgia is well, we're going to stand up to you when you do something that's against the law. But, oh, by the way, we're going to pass a bunch of laws to make what you objected to in actual reality. So therefore, we're going to support it in this. And so there's a huge difference between what is legal and what is moral and what is along with the Constitution, our democracy. So the Georgia officials seem to have only had a moral moment momentarily. But once they could get it into law, they're passing it into law just like they did during Jim Crow.
It is Tuesday, the 30th of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yes, whole nations have risen and fallen in pursuit of a spicier life. Well, I tried to avoid the Chauvin trial. I didn't watch it. I know that there's many ways that you can actually watch the whole trial, which is fantastic. I used to hang out at the courthouse when I was a kid and, check out trials and, sort of like be a court reporter of sorts. And I did. I reported on the courts in our little school paper. Well, that was another time and another day, but I really tried to avoid it because it just makes me mad. Especially when I hear these wacko defenses like George Floyd didn't die by having his neck choked off by a knee. He had a heart arrhythmia. Really? Well, my question always has been in situations like that, would George Floyd have died of a heart attack if Derek Chauvin hadn't choked him off for almost 10 minutes with a knee to the throat? I'm just, It's like with COVID. Would those people be dead from their breathing obstructions if they hadn't had the disease? Well, eventually, yeah, but not that day. And all the other excuses. So it's just, of course, the defense is trying to get a qualified immunity aspect in there. He was afraid. He was afraid of the crowd, and we have video. There's video from across the street while this whole incident is happening. And there was not a street full of people. There was a few. You had how many cops? 4 or 5 cops? 4 cops? Can't remember. You had a contingent, okay? You had backup and backup. And to get one guy down on the ground to kill him. And, so some civilians, I call them citizens. That's what cops call us. When we're not crooks, we're citizens. And they actually have less respect for citizens. Isn't that lovely? Anyway, so they felt threatened by the crowd. Well, the crowd called the cops on the cops. The crowd. So, yeah, this qualified immunity of, he feared for his life, so, they had to take the appropriate measures that were appropriate for the situation, and that situation demanded that he just lean on the guy's throat for 10 minutes while rummaging through his pockets for his keys. Okay. I hope the jury is smart enough. See, this is the problem with certain aspects of our jury system. To be completely objective, you have to not know anything about anything. And then what the attorneys, prosecutor, and defense attorneys have to do is somehow get the jury up to speed about, the ways of the world, like up is up and down is down. You can believe science even though it keeps changing as results as new evidence comes in. to counteract that part where they also say religion doesn't change at all. My religion doesn't change at all no matter what the facts are. I can't trust science. It keeps changing all the time. Well, other aspects of the way of the world. I mean, it's hard to get a true jury pool that's supposed to be, quote, objective. Is there some sort of objective aspect of anybody choking somebody off so cavalierly? The cop was afraid for his life, so he had to do it. That was the excuse for so long. But, you got video evidence. Well, I keep hearing the defense has video evidence, too. I don't know what that is. But their job is to pretty much gaslight the jury as well as the rest of the world. But most importantly, those 12 jurors, 14 if you count the alternates. So I tried to avoid it, but I didn't watch it. I just heard about it, and that's all I needed. So that's going on. Let's just talk a tad. Because this was pretty much the opening, and then, the introduction of some witnesses. Like the 9/11 dispatcher who thought she thought her screen was frozen. That's how cavalier Derek Chauvin was while strangling the guy with a knee. So I saw her testimony. The prosecutor saw his opening, thought it was, fairly powerful. Or I don't know. Powerful. What is that? He's laying out the case, and I got to tell you, to not know anything about this, what kind of American citizen are you? I mean, is this... that's the part of the jury system that I just, don't get. You have to fudge on it. Or, I think there were some that said, yeah, I saw these things, but that's not going to prevent me from, adjudicating this case and giving a proper sentence, a proper judgment. The judge gives a sentence. Or no, I guess maybe the jury has some part in it. But regardless, you can look at the evidence as it is presented and judge accordingly. And that's what juries are supposed to do. You're not you can't be completely devoid of what goes on in the world. Oh my God, there's telephones now? I had no idea. Yeah, well, we tapped his telephone. What's a telephone? Jury asks. So, yeah, up to the prosecutor and the defense attorney to get the dimwits on the jury up to speed. This is a modem. What? I don't know. So, yeah, the 9/11 dispatcher. Now, this is another aspect of cop culture, What was the first thing she told her supervisor? I know I'm going to be called a snitch. But what's going on here? And the supervisor said, you know what? There's something going on here. And now the cop union would be, pretty much taking care of her, except that she's a snitch. Yeah, well, that's what happens. You can tell a gang by their colors, That's what they say. You can tell a gang by the colors they wear. So I'm glad for the snitches. Whistleblowers. Because otherwise, well, they'd get away with it. And when I say they, I mean with a capital T. And they're not getting away with it anymore. Isn't that what's weird about technology? Because it can be good and bad. Having a camera on every corner and every pocket now, too. Maybe sometimes two pockets. In the same pants. Yeah, I got one cell phone camera for one thing and one cell phone camera for another. And, citizen journalism. They're going to make that illegal. In fact, some municipalities have tried. You can't film a cop while they're doing their job. What? Yeah, you can. You're across the street as long as you don't obstruct what they're doing. This is America, no matter what you think it is. Which brings me to the Koch brothers. I know one's dead, but we have one left. And Jane Mayer. Now, from an article that she wrote before Trump was out of office. Why was that held up? I always wonder what they're doing to Jane Mayer. But she got, I guess, a purloined tape of a audio tape of a conversation among the dark money deep pockets, like, the Petersons, the Koch organization, or whatever it's called now. The Kochs. I like to call them the Kochs, even though one's dead. And others. I bet the DeVosses were in there too, I'm sure. But they were all whining because H.R. 1 means that they won't be able to, buy off elections as easily as they've been able to do. And they might even get to the point where they're exposed for what they are doing. And why would they not? Why would they care? That's what I've always wondered. Why would they care? They're rich. They don't care about anything. But maybe the one thing that they do care about is their own survival. I mean, they are living organisms. I don't know what kind of volition that is moving them. I do. I suspect what it is. But, they fear for their own demise. Because there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And I keep saying, eating the rich is not cannibalism because it's only cannibalism if you eat a human. And that is what they fear, because they know that they're not human. They know that their inhumanity is so profound that, when they're found out, they might, they might not be around to do it anymore, and they can't stand that. I mean, mold's got a mold. Okay, well, rust never sleeps. You got to keep rubbing it out, and there's a lot of it when there's trillionaires of them. A lot of money there, and they think that they're God. It's just so weird. I have all these possessions. That means that I'm better than you. Okay, well, good. That's great. So, okay, you're a hoarder then. Hoarding your wealth. All right. Well, Jane Mayer exposed this, and they are very, 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 very afraid of democracy, especially representative democracy as it stands now. Because, maybe they're not so afraid of representative democracy, but they are sure afraid of the mob, as they call us. That's okay. They're not human, so we can eat the rich. I don't know if I'd want to, actually. Can you imagine the quality of that stuff? I don't know. But I'm sure it'd be really soft like veal. Anyway, maybe their days are numbered. I don't know. They seem to be pretty darn powerful, and they have a Praetorian Guard that will work with them at the snap of a finger. Look what happened to Occupy Wall Street. Yikes. Jeez. Did you think there was some separation between corporate America and the police force? That part of government? The part that democracy can fall into fascism? Well, we experienced that during Occupy Wall Street now, didn't we? So, I mentioned implied immunity. Well, they're not going to have that in New York PD anymore, and I bet those guys are not very happy about it. Their unions are going to go to work to find out who the snitches are in the department. Oh, boy. Well, there needs to be a purge of all of that. Out of the military, too. No matter what Tucker Carlson says and all the rest of those. Well, Goebbels. They're doing Goebbels work. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? We have to put a cap on the rant some point, don't we? And it's going to be now. Well, at the top, that was a breakdown about the Atlanta area prosecutor who is heading Trump's criminal probe. Well, she's beefed up her office with a new evidence expert. Yeah, some more racketeering guys. On the rest of the menu, the Education Department eased student loan relief for those with disabilities. A little bit more involved than what the headline would appear it to be. These are actually people who had their loans eased, and because they didn't fill out the paperwork properly, I guess it was in quadruplicate, or whatever, multiples of quadruplicate, they got kicked off because that was the way Trump liked it. You know, we don't need any crippled people around here. New Mexico sued the Nuclear Regulatory Commission over proposed nuclear waste storage plans. Well, I would too. And the Biden administration unveiled a big offshore wind power expansion to fight climate change. Good. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the global shipping backlog caused by the Suez Canal blockage could take months to clear. And as it shifts production increasingly toward electric vehicles, German automaker VW plans to change its brand name to Voltswagen. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, off to the right of the page is the chat room link, and you'll notice that right there to the right. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, how about if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could send those funds to us once a month, we stretch those dollars beyond compare. Well, we also put them together with the stretch dollars that we've been stretching beyond compare out of our own wallets, and we put that together as we have for the last 10 years. Yes, it is our 10th year anniversary this year. And we're saying happy birthday to us. Well, we've been doing so because of all these stretched dollars that have allowed us to pay our bills, fly under the radar, continue broadcasting in the resistance mode as the founders originally intended, oh so many, many years ago. It was a long time, indeed. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of me because I'm stuck with me. Thankfully, I am. Anyway, follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and then post that up on social media platforms like Twitter and others, and you know who they are. Do check out the show notes and links, because that's where the real reportage is. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. They're everywhere. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of the Associated Press by Colin, or I guess it's Colin in this instance, Binkley, Colin Binkley. The U.S. Education Department is canceling student debt for more than 40,000 Americans who were previously granted loan forgiveness because of disabilities, but later had their debt reinstated after they failed to submit certain paperwork. And the agency announced that yesterday, Monday. The action targets a loan forgiveness program that aims to help people with disabilities, but that critics say carries overly burdensome rules. After being granted loan forgiveness, borrowers are required to submit documentation of their earnings for 3 years. If their earnings go beyond certain thresholds, or if they fail to submit documentation, they're back on the hook for the loans. Yeah. You got to stand on one leg. You don't have any legs? Well, that's just too bad. You got to pay your whole loan now. Acknowledging the program's challenges, the Education Department said it will relax the rules during the coronavirus pandemic and consider other changes to the reporting requirements in the future. Oh, you mean true educators are involved in the Education Department now? Not some yacht sailing Amway distributing head? Yeah, that sounds nice. Until the federal government declares an end to the pandemic, more than 190,000 borrowers who are now in the 3-year monitoring period will not be required to submit proof of their earnings, the agency said. Another 41,000 who had debt reinstated over paperwork issues will again get loan forgiveness amounting to a combined $1.3 billion. Remember when Betsy DeVos said, "No, there's no loan forgiveness"? Well, Education Secretary, the good one, Miguel Cardona, said borrowers with disabilities should not put their health on the line to submit earnings information. The measure was a disappointment to advocates who have called for a total overhaul of the program. Student Defense, a Washington legal group, said the action helps a small fraction of borrowers eligible for the program. The group has urged Biden to automatically clear loans for all eligible borrowers and to eliminate the monitoring period permanently. Well, I would say in the realm of governance, and when you have a master tactician of the Senate who knows rules inside out like a Joe Biden, sometimes baby steps are what you need before you kick him in the teeth. Susan Montoya Bryan of the AP brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. New Mexico sued the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission yesterday, Monday, over concerns that the federal agency has not done enough to vet plans for a multi-billion-dollar facility to store spent nuclear fuel in the state, arguing that the project would endanger residents, the environment, and the economy. New Jersey-based Holtec International wants to build a complex in southeastern New Mexico where tons of spent fuel from commercial nuclear power plants around the nation would be stored until the federal government finds a permanent solution. State officials worry that New Mexico will become a permanent dumping ground for the radioactive material because there's nothing there, it's only desert. The complaint filed in federal court contends the commission overstepped its authority regarding Holtec's plans and that granting a license to the company could result in imminent and substantial endangerment to New Mexico. The state cited the potential for surface and groundwater contamination, disruption of oil and gas development, in one of the nation's most productive basins, and added strain on the emergency response resources. The state also raised concerns about a similar project planned just across the state line in West Texas. New Mexico has accused the commission of colluding with Holtec in rubber stamping the proposal. The state argues that almost every interested party that has filed a challenge has been denied standing and an opportunity to meaningfully participate. The Nuclear Commission did not respond to questions about New Mexico's complaint. However, it issued an order last year that denied appeals from several groups with arguments similar to the state's. The commission has held public hearings during the licensing process, and an environmental review was done. This is all Trump stuff, folks. It's all Trump stuff. Now, The commission informed Holtec last week that the final safety evaluation report would be delayed because the company provided inadequate answers to several technical areas, including soil settlement and an analysis of flooding and aircraft crash hazards. Holtec is seeking a 40-year license to build what it has described as a state-of-the-art complex near Carlsbad, which already is home to the federal government's only underground repository of Cold War-era waste generated by decades of nuclear research and bomb making. Richard Valdmanis and Nicola Groom of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Biden administration yesterday, Monday, unveiled a goal to expand the nation's fledgling offshore wind energy industry in the coming decade by opening new areas to development, accelerating permits, and boosting public financing for projects. The plan is part of President Joe Biden's broader effort to eliminate U.S. greenhouse gas emissions to fight climate change, an agenda that Republicans argue could bring economic ruin, but which Democrats say can create jobs while protecting the environment. Yes, indeed. The blueprint for offshore wind power generation comes after the administration's suspension of new oil and gas leasing auctions on federal lands and waters, widely seen as a first step to fulfilling Biden's campaign promise of a permanent ban on new federal drilling to counter global warming. The United States, with just 2 small offshore wind facilities, has lagged European nations in developing the renewable energy technology. The administration of Biden's predecessor, Trump, had vowed to launch offshore wind as a promising new domestic industry, but failed to permit any projects. Well, that was a plan, wasn't it? We're ready to rock and roll, National Climate Advisor Gina McCarthy said at a virtual press conference to announce the administration's moves. The plan sets a target to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2030, which the administration said would be enough to power 10 million homes and cut 78 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. One of the first steps will be to open a new offshore wind energy development zone in the New York Bight, an area off the densely populated coast between Long Island, New York, and New Jersey, with a lease auction there later this year. The industry will employ 44,000 workers directly by 2030 and support 33,000 additional support jobs, the administration said, with a promise that they would be good-paying union jobs. Many of the jobs will be created at new factories that will produce the blades, towers, and other components for massive offshore wind turbines, and at shipyards where the specialized ships that are needed to install them will be constructed. The administration predicted the nation would see port upgrade investments related to offshore wind of more than $500 million. The administration said it will also aim to speed up project permits, including environmental reviews, and provide $3 billion in public financing for offshore wind projects through the Department of Energy. The plan was met with skepticism by a fishing industry group that noted the plan's pledge of just $1 million for research into the effects of offshore wind on fisheries Fishing groups worry that massive turbines in the ocean would interfere with fishing routes and impact commercial species. Oh, gee. Are you telling me that offshore oil derricks don't cause something to the fish? Are you telling me the big old oil tankers that are sometimes anchored quite a ways offshore with pipes running their oil and spilling oil all over the place, you don't think that has some sort of impact upon your fishing industry? But a wind turbine does. Actually, you know, when you bury something out there or sink something out there in the ocean, you know what happens? Whole ecosystems arise. It helps the ocean, okay? If there's any kind of disruption to the fishing industry out there, I would say maybe it's overfishing by the fishing industry. More wind, less whining. Let's go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Welcome to COVID Quickly, a new Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're going to be talking about the barriers Black and Latino people face in getting COVID vaccines.
How your immune system strikes back against coronavirus variants.
And what the heck is going on with the AstraZeneca vaccine?
The pace of COVID vaccinations is picking up in the U.S. More than 87 million people have gotten at least one dose. Still, communities hit hardest by the disease are getting left behind. Who are they, and what's the trouble?
It's true that states are opening up vaccination to more and more people, but Black and Latino people are still getting vaccinated at lower rates than white and Asian people, despite getting sick and dying at higher numbers from COVID.
I know you did some reporting on this with our colleague, graphics editor Amanda Montañez. What states did you look at?
So we broke down the data for 5 populous states with some of the worst COVID outbreaks: California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois. The data show that Latino people had some of the lowest vaccination rates proportional to their share of the population, especially in California and Texas. Black people in New York, Illinois, and Florida are also getting vaccinated at notably lower levels.
What's behind those trends? What's the reason for them?
Well, many states have age minimums for vaccination, but Black people have a shorter life expectancy than white people on the whole, so they are at higher risk of dying before they even reach the age cutoff. And many Black and Latino households are less likely to have high-speed internet and the time to spend online booking appointments. They're also less likely to own a car or be able to get to the vaccination sites. Language barriers and ID requirements also make it harder for some people to get their shots. Finally, vaccine hesitancy plays a role in some communities of color for legitimate reasons, but more and more of those people are now willing to get a vaccine. The government and health departments could make it easier by lowering some age barriers, helping those most at risk make and get their appointments, and opening more community clinics. People are worried about all these new coronavirus variants with mutations, thinking that they might evade the new vaccines. But you've found out that our bodies may have some countermeasures, right?
Right. We've all heard by now about the variants popping up that are more infectious than the original. Well, it turns out your virus-fighting cells may be evolving to keep up with them. Several teams of immunologists have been looking at people who were infected with the virus early in the pandemic. These people have antibodies against that early version of the virus. But, and this is really fascinating, the people also have reserve armies of immune cells. 6 months later, these armies have mutated a little bit. They now churn out antibodies that are shaped a bit differently. Some of them seem to be a better fit for the new variants. In test tubes, those antibodies neutralize the newer virus versions. Essentially, the immune system is trying to get ahead of the virus, says Michel Nuzensweig, an immunologist at Rockefeller University in New York, who did some of this work. Monique Brulette, one of our writers, learned that researchers are trying to figure out if the body makes enough of these reserves to knock down a variant infection completely. They don't know yet, but it's encouraging to think that our bodies aren't just sitting around, but actively trying to come up with new antivirus weapons. Why is there so much controversy over the AstraZeneca vaccine? It's been approved in Europe, but not yet in the US. I keep hearing about side effects and questions about how effective it is. What should we know?
Last week, there were concerns that the vaccine may have been linked to blood clots, but the European Medicines Agency, Europe's FDA, concluded that it is safe and effective, and the benefits outweigh the risks. And AstraZeneca has had some self-imposed problems too. Earlier this week, the company put out a press release saying that the vaccine was 78% effective at preventing COVID in a US trial. But then, in a highly unusual statement, a committee of scientists that was monitoring the trial put out a letter saying it was concerned that the company was using outdated results and suggesting that the efficacy might actually be lower. Then on Wednesday, AstraZeneca put out another statement based on more recent results that showed its vaccine is 76% effective, and it protects against severe disease. That is all very good, so it seems to be more of a communication issue than a science one. Right now, Americans have access to 3 other vaccines, but AstraZeneca's could still be hugely important for the rest of the world. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
How many people did the Trump administration execute during the run-up to the 2020 election and before he left office?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
The number is 13, which is 13 more federal executions than had been carried out since 2003. That's right. Since 2003, there had been exactly none. And in 2020, the federal government, with its 10 executions, executed more people than all 50 states combined. Today, there are over 2,500 people on death rows in the United States, 50 of them facing a federal death sentence. Joe Biden's position has been that he is opposed to capital punishment, a promise he could fulfill by commuting the sentences of the 50 people on federal death row to life imprisonment, and or by declaring a moratorium on federal executions. And Attorney General Eric Holder could ensure that no execution dates are set. New death sentences imposed countrywide have dropped from a high of 315 in 1996 to 18 in 2020. And the number of executions carried out has dropped from 98 in 1999 to 17 last year, including the 10 federal executions. All of which means that the death penalty in America slowly, however slowly, thankfully, is dying.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1870. That was the day the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was adopted. It was the third of the Reconstruction Amendments. It prohibited voting restrictions on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Premier historian Eric Foner states that the Reconstruction Amendments reflected, quote, a newly empowered national state and the idea of a national citizenry enjoying equality before the law. These legal changes also arose from the militant demands for equal rights from former slaves themselves. The bulk of southern states refused to ratify, but then capitulated. Interestingly, New York sought and failed to revoke its earlier ratification. The amendment split the women's suffrage movement for its failure to codify women's voting rights. Some radical Republicans also abstained on the basis that it did not also prohibit poll taxes and literacy tests. Immediately, the 15th Amendment came under attack. The Ku Klux Klan terrorized black voters and Reconstruction governments for years. One of the most extreme examples was the 1873 Colfax Massacre. After the Compromise of 1877, President Rutherford B. Hayes refused to enforce civil rights protections. The rise of discriminatory Jim Crow laws effectively disenfranchised Southern blacks for nearly a century. Congress would finally enforce the 15th Amendment fully through the Landmark Voting Rights Act of 1965. However, the act has come under attack most recently, as in the 2013 case Shelby versus Holder. Jurisdictions with histories of voter restrictions no longer have to obtain pre-clearance before implementing changes to voting laws and practices. Over 150 years after the end of the Civil War, African Americans are still fighting to protect their right to vote. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 28 degrees Fahrenheit. We are in an active freeze warning for another few hours, and sunny conditions should prevail with highs in the mid-60s, winds light and variable, and clear skies overnight with lows in the mid-30s, winds remaining light and variable. Sunny skies tomorrow with a spiked increase in temperature of close to 80, with winds remaining light and variable. Confirmed cases for coronavirus have been updated from the weekend and now have spiked to 9,159, almost 100 more cases from the weekend. The confirmed deceased remain at 120. So I would say continue wearing a mask and, keep washing your hands, please. Let's see. Oh, wow, grass pollen is finally rated as low. Right here in Rogue River proper, the air quality index is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index has now gone to high at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.42 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 75 degrees and sunny. Paris is 76 and sunny. Rome is 73 and sunny. Kyiv is 54 and fair. Kabul is 50 degrees fair but very windy. Hong Kong is 74 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 63 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 with a light rain. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and sunny. And New York is a lovely 54 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Reuters staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The stranding of a container ship in the Suez Canal has created disruptions in the global shipping industry that could take weeks and possibly months to clear. Around 30% of the world's shipping container volume, including goods like sofas, consumer electronics, apparels, and shoes, moves through the 120-mile Suez Canal daily. Empty containers, which Asian factories need to ship goods, are also caught up in the backlog. Even when the canal gets reopened, the ripple effects on global capacity and equipment are significant, the world's largest container shipping company, Maersk, said in a customer advisory yesterday, Monday. Maersk has 3 vessels stuck in the canal and another 29 waiting to enter, and it had so far rerouted 15 vessels to sail south of Africa instead. Assessing the current backlog of vessels, it could take 6 days or more for the complete queue to pass. Switzerland's MSC, the world's number 2 line, said separately on Saturday the situation was going to result in one of the biggest disruptions of global trade in recent years. Unfortunately, even when the canal reopens for the huge backlog of ships waiting at anchorage, this will lead to a surge in arrivals at certain ports, and we may experience fresh congestion problems, MSC said in a statement. Container shipping companies have been struggling for months with disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic and a surge in demand for retail goods that led to wider logistical bottlenecks around the world.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Tom Krischer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Volkswagen plans to change its brand name in the United States to Voltswagen as it shifts its production increasingly toward electric vehicles and tries to distance itself from an emissions cheating scandal. A person briefed on the plan said a formal announcement is planned for Tuesday. The person did not want to be identified because the plans had not been made public. Oh, a little bit of a scandal, eh? The company had briefly posted a press release on its website early yesterday, Monday, announcing the brand name change, and the press release was noticed by a reporter from USA Today before it was removed. The release was dated April 29th. The premature release comes as VW is taking reservations for the new ID.4 small electric SUV in the United States. It's the company's only new electric model sold in the U.S., though there are plans for more, including a nostalgic reprise of the company's microbus. The exterior badge with the name Voltswagen will be affixed to the company's electric vehicles, while the gas-powered vehicles will still have the normal VW, but no brand name on them. The premature news release said the move amounted to a public declaration of the company's future investment in electric mobility. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, and why wouldn't we? So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.